line that we make. It's not really out there. And yes?
I was just wondering, in 21st century Saudi Arabia, do they still have these familial divisions, or is it?
After they found oil, things changed, but it's not exactly like us here. Mm-hmm. But it's people figure out how to get along. Mm. And like in Saudi Arabia, they wear different clothes than people in this country wear. So where someone in this country, maybe he wears a suit and a tie. Someone in Saudi Arabia, they wear something they call bisht, or you know what it is? Mm-hmm. Like a cloak or a mishlah. Mm-hmm. They look different, but they're approximately the same thing. They're for the same purpose. But if the president of this country were to come out and give a speech in the Arabian cloak, or an official in Saudi Arabia were to come out in a suit and tie, something's wrong there. Mm-hmm. But they have the same thing, they just look different.
And they still have all these tribes, correct?
Things changed a lot after they discovered oil.
Okay.
So we choose to imagine things in terms of land, although that's how we imagine things, but it's not entirely like that. Mm-hmm. Because if I have a child outside of this country, what citizenship does the child take?
The country's.
No.
It depends on the country.
In this country, wherever, if I belong to this tribe, my child automatically belongs to this tribe, mm-hmm. No matter where.
U.S. citizen?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're a U.S. citizen, you can have a kid outside of.
Yes. Whether mother or father,
That's really nice.
Well, and that's common. That's what's unusual about this country is that geography is recognized here. That anyone who is born inside the boundaries of the country automatically gets citizenship. That's very unusual. But it's also hereditary. The child gets citizenship, and he's a member of the tribe, even if no matter where in the world he's born. In some culture, and this is in West Africa.
Well, it's like that in West Africa too. I mean, at least in Nigeria, if your father is Nigerian, no matter where in the world you're born, you're Nigerian.
But historically, because I know that there's Hausa.
We still have those tribes.
Yeah.
They're still there, but it's divided up into states.
Yeah, and it's after colonialism, mm-hmm. And things changed. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of forced from outside. Mm-hmm. But they still have these
the
families.
Mm-hmm.
And Hausa, some of them are in Nigeria, and some of them are outside of Nigeria. Mm-hmm. Yoruba, mm-hmm. And there's Igbo and Fuleta, mm-hmm. And the lines are drawn by the lineage, okay. Not by the geography, even though it changes in some places.
Okay.
Also, even in this country, up to this day, we still draw some lines by. Yeah. Even we call it tribal. Yeah, what am I talking about?
The Native American tribes?
Yes. The people who were living here when the Europeans came, mm-hmm. are a different nation, a different entity. Mm-hmm. And not all of them joined the tribe of the Europeans. So like the Constitution doesn't apply to them. They have their specific pieces of land, they have their own jurisdiction, and they have their own police, and they make their own laws. and they don't have to observe the Constitution. There's an agreement that the federal government provides them with military protection, but it's the laws of the Constitution don't apply to them. They have their own laws that don't necessarily follow the Constitution, and this country has agreed to. This country has no jurisdiction over them. It's like they're two different countries, and that's by tribal things, and we even call it tribal. Why do you think that, for example, in this time, in this place, people agreed to draw the lines around, instead of drawing the lines around land, they drew them around lineage? Why do you think at one time or another people may do this instead of doing that?
Does it have to do with the location that they're not maybe as settled?
Yeah, most of the children of Ismail, where do they live?
Arabian coast of the desert.
Yeah, most of them, and Quraysh is an exception.
But
Quraysh
most of
lives
them
in
were
Mecca.
nomads.
Most of them don't live in one particular place.
They were nomads.
So that doesn't help you, you can't draw the lines around. And most of us here now, we live in one place and we stay there for a pretty long period of time. That makes it easier for us. We'll draw the line around the people who are here in this area. They'll take care of these certain things, while the people on the other side of that line, they'll be responsible for these things. But if everybody is moving around, you can't do that. So you draw lines around something else. Which way is better? As far as I'm concerned, it's a dumb question. Because I didn't choose where I was born, and a person in Somalia or Nigeria didn't choose where they were born. So if you didn't have a choice in it, how can you brag about it, and how can you be blamed for it? In the Quran, what I know is we're responsible to do good by our neighbor and by our relatives. And by default, these things aren't jahiliyyah, and they're cooperation. Unless you choose to say this city is better than this city, or this family is better than this family, and make a fight over it, that's an exception. That's not the rule. There are types of cooperation, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran commanded us to do good. وَالْجَارِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْجَارِ الْجُنُوبِ. Your neighbor, the member of your community, whether he's related, whether he's closely related to you or distantly. So, and like we pretend that these lines go around land, and that nothing is hereditary, but there are a lot of things that are hereditary, and we make, historically, for historic reasons, we have a big deal about particular offices can't be hereditary. But in reality, no one can hold a public office in this country unless they belong. There are two particular tribes that have a monopoly on public office, and you have to join one of those two tribes if you want to hold any public office. If you want to hold major public offices, you have to join the tribe of a particular university. In addition to that, that's what happens. It's not a law, but that's how people end up organizing themselves. And then we see in this country, it's not supposed to be hereditary, but you'll see there's a husband and a wife, and a father and his sons, and two brothers, or a family that is, people trust that family, or they know that family, so they're constantly put in that position of public office. And then in like Quraysh, where it's supposed to be hereditary, it's not always hereditary. Because we see all of these people that we're calling them residents, they're khulafa. They belong to a different lineage, but they joined another lineage. And in fact, one of these branches of Quraysh, which is Zuhra, their president is not from them by lineage. He's from Thaqif. His name was Al-Akhnas ibn Shurayq. But he's in charge of them. And he's not from the same lineage. And they do what he tells them to do. And in Badr, there were 3 branches that didn't attend Badr. Banu Adi didn't go out in the first place. Banu Hashim were turned back. And they agreed to go back. There was Banu Zuhra. This man, who wasn't from them by blood, he said, let's go back, the caravan is safe. There's no need to fight. And they all went back. So it's supposed to be hereditary, but it's not hereditary. And here, we like to think that it's not hereditary, but it is. There is hereditary things there. So people end up behaving in basically the same ways. We just give different names to it. That's why even though maybe right now you and I don't spend a lot of time talking about, if we were to do that here, there would be something wrong with it. Because there's no point in doing that. There's a particular way of organizing ourselves. There's no need for me to do that. That's like I'm trying to start some kind of fight or something, but it's not the same here. And when we're talking about it here, it's like saying a city or talking about a city or a county or a country. And here it's more like a country, because they're all they haven't given anyone like everyone is responsible for their own law enforcement and their own military protection. There's no police, and they don't give up any pledge to surrender that power to a particular police force or a particular army. So every family has to take care of itself. Now, there are some other things that we have here that we'll, inshallah, we'll cover them next week. They have to do with the second batch that returned from Abyssinia, even though it was almost 10 years later. But we'll go a little bit out of order to mention some of those things next week, inshallah.
I have one last question.
Yes, sister.
And this is for my own education, I don't know a lot about the history of Saudi Arabia, but the current royal family, where do they fit in with everything that we're talking about?
They are from, they go back to a branch that is called Banu Hanifa.
Okay.
I can show them to you on a bigger map.
Okay.
But up until very recently, the big branches that were there in the time we're talking about from Jahiliyyah were the same until they discovered oil, and a lot of things changed. They may have shifted names, like what was Ghatafan became Mutayr, and what was Amir became Subay', and what was Sulaim became Harb. They shifted names, but basically the same. It's the same political entity in the same general territory. But the name shifted, yeah.
Okay.
But a lot of things changed. a lot of things changed after they discovered oil. Because a lot of people came to the cities now. And you talk to some, I've talked to some brothers from Saudi Arabia who are kind of younger, and they grew up in the generation after, they grew up in a particular city. And sometimes I know more about their tribe than they do. I know it belongs to this thing way back in history. Because it doesn't matter to them anymore. When we're talking here, these things matter. But just like my social security number and how many times you have to fill out your address on a piece of paper. You go around with that license plate, with that stamp of that state on your car, wherever you go. You always have that driver's license with you. It matters so much that you take it for granted. It's automatic. And whenever I talk to somebody, I always ask them, where are you from? I don't really care about like the dirt that was underneath your feet. I care about the tribe that you belong to. But in my language, I imagine it in terms of geography. Whereas in another place, another time, person may think of it in terms of the ancestry or the family. So it's the same thing. We do the same thing. We just paint it a different color, or we just use different words for it. Just like people in Saudi Arabia, they wear a particular thing. People in this country, they wear a particular, but it has the same purpose, even though it looks a little bit different. It's a different color. It's the same thing. No.
Yeah, and just a comment, as we're talking about all of this, it's just amazing to me how detailed all this information has been preserved from thousands of years. So I guess this is just a general question. How was this preserved?
This thing
through all those years?
About the genealogy, especially, it's like public knowledge, and because it matters, it's just like everybody knows, like the borders of Charlottesville, the borders of Virginia. It's so important to us that it's beyond being a big deal. It's just like assumed. So these things, especially with Quraysh, because Quraysh is like almost a political party. And then after the Prophet ﷺ was sitting among them, then people took a special care. But because the borders of their country are along the boundaries of lineage, they take special care of doing these things. Just like we make if you look at a map or a satellite image of North America, like because of where I grew up, I see all these lines automatically there, because that's what I use that map for. And it's the same thing with this history. That's why it's so well preserved.
Okay, thank you.
جزاكم الله خير. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تدع فينا ولا معنا شقيا ولا محروما. It's also important to understand these things, because this is very important. When you read about someone doing something here that has to do with, like it's a military action or law enforcement, it's not just like a random person doing that because they're angry or they're in a particular mood. There are agreements and there are responsibilities that have been made. And in some situations, law enforcement has a responsibility to do. Like someone who, in our place, someone who went to the police academy and they give an oath to become a police officer, they have particular responsibilities, and they have there's oversight, there's accountability. They are responsible for doing particular things. If they don't do those particular things, they're putting everyone in danger, they're not doing their job. If someone, just because he feels a particular way, does what he is responsible for not doing, I'm not a police officer, so in my situation, in the agreement that I'm under, there are situations when my responsibility is to call the police officer.
Mm-hmm.
I have delegated that to them. If I do, and it's the police officer's responsibility to do it. It's bad when I do it, but it's an obligation for the police officer to do it. So this is another reason why it's important to understand some of these things, so we don't end up doing something, even though this should be just like common sense, but a person doesn't end up doing something that's bad and think they have a justification for doing it. Now, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت وباركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خير.